All right, man. All right, we got it. We're going to crank it up again, huh? Here we go.
Dude, yeah, we're going to. I mean, honestly, it's all I've thought about the last 24 hours. I'm not lying. Like, it's legit.
Last 24 hours.
I mean, maybe not all 24 hours. I'll try to sleep a little bit and, do some other things. But yeah, it's been on my mind. We talked a lot about fueling last week. We talk a lot about it today. It's September 12th, the year. It's 2024. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 797.
Yeah. I can just see you on the couch with a notepad and like nibbling on a Fifth Avenue bar. Just thinking about nutrition, man.
It's not even nutrition. Yeah, it's we'll get into. We talked a lot of it about on Tuesday, and I'm so jazzed. I'm skipping the intro. But yeah, we talked a lot about on Tuesday and talking about post Ironman Wisconsin and fueling recommendations and I want to say out of the gate, like this, the conversation that you and I have oftentimes off air about what makes sense, and you and I will readily admit, like neither one of us are sports dietitians or sports nutritionists, but and even when it comes to like sports science, like we're not sports scientists. We have a pretty amazing track record of putting out awesome athletes and awesome times and great performances. But the genesis behind the podcast is one is to make you think, right? And I think that's a huge important piece of nutrition and fueling. And I was having this discussion actually in the kitchen last night while Hayden was at baseball with Allie, and she was talking about some training protocols and stuff like that. And then she said, well, I have to believe that it works. And I said, well, that's not true. I said, you have to believe that it could work. And then you try it, and then you have to see things to believe that it is working. And I think that's a huge disconnect that we see a lot with athletes when it comes to training protocols and nutrition and fueling, is that they just see it and they think, oh, I believe that's going to work for me. And then they just fly in the face of listening to their body and in repercussions and other pieces of science that are out there. Instead of listen, I'm all for experimentation, huge fan of it, do it all the time. But you can't just blindly follow, which again is what I think most people do in society these days. Is they're headline readers and they're following influencers on TikTok and Instagram and Strava and watching YouTube videos, and they're just all about believing what someone else is telling you is true, and it must be true for you. Right? It's like, the WebMD affirmation where you think you're sick, so you look up on the internet and all you do is find symptoms that match the worst possible case scenario. So there's believing something could work for you, right? That gives you enough belief to get started. But in order to believe that it's working, you have to see results. It has to make sense to you. And so like as we talk about this topic today, and we talk about fueling and I'm not just talking about like intra-race fueling, I'm talking about just day-to-day fueling. And this has been my own personal experience, has been experience with athletes. And this is just what I personally believe as both an athlete and a coach. And so when you hear us both talk about these things, because you and I are always pretty aligned on this, whether we talk about it on air or not. And, so it's to get you to critically think and about yourself not just as a triathlete, but as a human. And so we talked a lot about on Tuesday about the new fad, which is now, how many carbohydrates can I take in an hour? And I'm really, and it's like, now there's, and I think one of the most fascinating, but two frustrating pieces of this is oftentimes when I'll go and take or dog waffles on a walk in the morning, I listen to podcasts from sports scientists and coaches. And I remember I listened to two back to back, and they were in the same subject area, and they both cited at least 10 to 20 research papers, and they were both contradictory. So you have like the brightest minds in the sport, right? One's talking about, well, this is what you have to have for, to be successful, the highest in the spectrum performance sports, which is, 100, 120, we're even working up to 160 grams an hour. Like we're now able to consume and digest a lot more than we once thought. And the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody that you also respect and is highly respected in the sport that's saying that's total bullshit, and also citing papers to convert. So I think that's the most frustrating piece, especially for age groupers, is kind of like filtering through the immense amount of information right? That's also, if we're being honest about it, I think it's very, very hard these days to filter, and I'm probably like open up a big can of worms with you right now here, but I'm going to say it anyway, is I think there's a huge issue with filtering through what is information and what is marketing and what is propaganda, right? And I think,
that word was
even going back to like
head.
When, I know, right?
Even before you said that,
it's going back to when, even Gatorade, right? Like it's there's we'll get into it all, but I think it's an important discussion, right, for everyone to kind of sit back and instead of trying to copy and paste what your favorite pro triathlete is doing, or maybe even honestly what the trend is going to, is to think critically for yourself. Again, not for what Robbie wants to do for Robbie, what Mike wants to do for Mike, but critically think about what you think makes sense to you. And again, not just in the aspect and in the realm of what we do as triathletes, right? Because even if you work out 12 to 14 hours a week, that's just a half day of your week. The rest of it is living life, right? And I think, and one just final precursor before I toss it to you and we get rolling is I think what we all have to also remember is the highest performing athletes on the planet are almost willing to do anything. Right? I mean, doping is the greatest example of all, right? The highest level athletes, with the ones that have the highest following, the biggest YouTube channels, the most amount of followers, the ones that put out all the content, they're at the highest in sport. They're willing to do anything to win. Could be doping, right? Could be cheating, could be treating their body like they're not concerned about longevity in life. And they would probably tell you that, right? I mean, look back in the 80s and 90s, you had Tour de France cyclists like doing things that could kill you, right? Doing blood transfusions and, beat down hotel rooms and, the back roads of France to try and win a stage and win what? Win a trophy? It's like they were making great coin back then. So when you look through and you see these YouTube videos and you see all these things that are being pushed and shoved down your throat, please also do it with a grain of salt and think are they really thinking about total overall, like total body health here and what's best for them from a longevity standpoint? Or are they worried about what they can do right now and also what they can do to sell you right
now? You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
For now. I think that's a really good intro. And, as we talked the other day and the things I've been thinking about ever since, there's this very, very interesting perspective of, obviously I think that most Americans are probably unhealthy and probably overweight and depressed and said there's a lot of crap going in the body. And, to me, it's, you talk about, the outside aisles of the supermarket versus the inside aisles, and most people live in the inside, and there's preservatives and synthetic ingredients and things like that. And my personal belief is that's what the problem is.
For sure.
I think that in a weird way, that thing is just sort of dovetailed into performance athletics. And now we're all doing the same fucking thing and expecting different results. It's sort of like you said about Gatorade, it was like, oh, that was, like the first, thing that kind of popped up. And now it's like triathletes are, they're literally sort of living day by day by, snacking on Cliff Bars or, taking down a goo when they need some energy, like during their normal days. And I feel like we're just sort of falling into the same trap in a lot of ways. So, again, it's that marketing stuff that, and I fall for it. It's easy to fall for it. And you're probably online scrolling and right there is probably an indicator that you're not in the best mindset because it's something you're just escaping. And so now you're a little vulnerable and you're going to click on some damn new thing that has really great headlines and a cool video and it seems like it works. And then, but every once in a while I look at this stuff and I'll go into the comments and people are just, kind of complaining about it, but like it's so far deep. It's like kind of actually reading a whole article instead of just the headline. And I think we're just headline readers in nutrition and everything we buy and things like that too. And I don't know, I many times I've ordered things and been like, ugh, this is such a disappointment, but then you just kind of put it away or whatever. But it's almost like, yeah, we're just reaching for that headline and clicking for that instant sort of like, it's almost like once you buy it, you know, that actual action becomes part of the satisfaction for you, because then really, then you get whatever it is in the mail, a 24 pack of some new nutritional, you know, savior, and it doesn't even do anything for you. You don't even like it. Yeah. But you think you do.
I mean, but you're an ambassador, and that's the big thing. You can be the ambassador for, which is always like, and you bring up such a good point about like scrolling through, is I think people have a very like, don't really think through like what I've found through scrolling or YouTube or research. People often think like they get confused with the difference between an answer and an option. Right? They say, "Oh, this is the answer. This is for me." But no, it's not. It's an option. Right? It's an option that could work for you, but they don't want to think through that, because then it causes more thinking. They just want to say, "Oh, well, this is definitely this is the answer for me." No, it's just a fucking option. Like, your option is everything from, you know, never consuming a carbohydrate in any walk of life, any day of the week, to that's all you basically eat. You have the entire area in the middle that's probably you. Period. Just like on the planet, there's one fastest person on the planet in a sport, and there's one least fast. Everyone else, we're just stuck in the fucking middle. And so I think when people read through these things, even like anyway, can we get rolling? I want to talk through a few things about this new obsession, and you already nailed it in terms of like and it's not a secret, and it's not a guess. You're 100% right. I mean, diabetes on the rise in America. Like, we're hyped up on sugar and processed food, and that is how we got here. I don't think anyone can safely say with a straight face this is the healthiest America's ever been. No. Obesity rates out the roof. You know, mental health, you know, is declining rapidly. Suicide rates. I mean, it's like you look through, and you might not think those are connected, but I firmly believe that it's all connected, right? And so when you look at, you know, talking about, you know, inter race training and fueling when you're training and racing, to me it's all flowed on a gradual chart, right? So you look at the world that we live in now, where most things are processed, like you talked about. Yes, we really want to, you know, search and work the perimeter of the grocery store, but we all know that going down the aisles is going to happen, right? But that's where the processed foods are. So processed foods and sugars, like, you know, and carbohydrates, the amount that most people take in, right, is enormous. Right. So you have a population, which every triathlete is part of that population, right, where we consume an enormous amount of carbohydrates and sugar every single day, which is interesting, right? Because if you would talk to any doctor, I think, and I don't think a single solitary person would say, you know what, I've really heard that taking in a lot more grains and sugar and, you know, tripling your carbohydrates and sugar rate, that's going to help you get rid of the disease you have. I don't think I've ever heard that, right? A lot of people say reduce your sugar intake, like, as a number one thing you can do to like help fend off most types of how you feel, or if it's fatigue, right? Another huge issue. So if you take athletes, right, and I want to kind of draw a correlation between how we live now as humans with how we now train as athletes. And I think that's how we've gotten to this point. I was thinking about, that's my walk this morning, is you have a society, which is us, right? We're not special. We're triathletes. We live in the society that we live in, where it's carbohydrates are pushed on you. And again, carbohydrates and sugar, fats, none of them are bad. It's all, to me, it's all about, you know, the appropriate amount to have. None of it is bad to me, right? So I'm not hopping on that train that carbs and sugar are bad, fats and proteins are bad or good, and vice versa. I just think there's an amount there's appropriate amount for everybody. And so you see the world that we live in, right, which is all processed foods. You can unwrap it, you can eat it, right? I would venture to say very few things you can unwrap and eat are probably not processed, right? Like, you're not unwrapping an apple or a or banana, right? You're maybe peeling them, but that's it. So you take that, right, where we're probably already becoming more insulin resistant because the amount and the stuff that we take in is having less of an effect, right? Like the more you drink coffee, the less of an effect. The more alcohol you drink, like as an addict, the more that you need, right? The more that you crave, the amount of sugar and insulin and glucose spikes that you have because of the amount of carbohydrates and sugar you're taking in, like you have those spikes, and then you have a huge crash, right? Which is a huge sign of taking in too much. Well, then the answer is what? I need more.
Yeah.
Right. So we've trained our body to need and want and crave enormous amount of carbohydrates, an enormous amount of sugar, right? Where most people probably aren't taking in near as much protein as they probably should. And then, so you take that, which is us, right, which is society, and triathletes are part of the population, and then you take it to the training aspect of it, right? And if you look at what people are trying, in my opinion, again, what people are trying to do now is instead of trying to become more metabolically flexible, which is being able to have a high fat oxidation rate and also be able to utilize and consume the right amount of carbohydrates and sugar to replenish and top off their glycogen stores, people aren't doing that anymore. Right? They look at pro triathletes who, again, the number one thing you need to increase your fat oxidation is training. An enormous amount of training volume is what you need to do that. That's what pro triathletes are doing. They don't have to do any kind of, they don't have to, they might, right? But they may do some carbohydrate periodization throughout their year, throughout their week. But most of them, they're constantly running around in a glycogen depleted state. Right? You listen to any of them talk, like they go to the pool in the morning, they swim 6K. Then in the afternoon, they hop on their bike for 3 hours and run for 50. Like that's more volume than some age group triathletes get in a week. Right? So they don't have to do that. And their fat oxidation rates are much, much higher than average age groupers. They're doing 25 to 30 hours a week, 15 to 25. It might be even just aerobic, like fat oxidative training. Then you got age group athletes. So you've got that part of the population, which that's the one that age group athletes listen to for whatever reason, right? Even though they couldn't be any further from you, right? Most of them aren't married. Most of them don't have kids. Most of them are training 5 hours, 5 times the amount of volume you're training. And most have been doing this for 10 years longer than you have. But sure, let's do exactly what they're doing and exactly what they're telling us to do. And they're the feed commercials and I'm pushing this product on you. Like, think through it, right? So you got those athletes, right? And then you have the age group athletes, again, us, right? Part of the population I just talked about that consume processed foods and junk all the time. And we say, you know what we need? We don't have that time. We just got to hammer it 24/7. I got to hop on Swift and do some races. Everything that I do, I got to go hard, baby. So what you don't do is you never work on your fat oxidation. You never work in like a fat max zone. You don't do enough zone 2 to burn through fat or to actually make yourself metabolically flexible. All you do is you're like gray zone 3 training, zone 4. And what are you doing when you do those things? Oh, baby, I am just topping up. I got 6 gels a day. I'm working on taking in as many calories as I can. And so if you think about like the amount that you're trying to overkill in your body with what you're actually doing it, like you're making your body more inflexible, right? And I'll talk about more about the flexibility and the importance of that and how to kind of periodize that here in a minute. But so you take those two and they're total opposite, right? And so they not total opposite. They marry each other and they make things even worse. So you got your human body, right, that you're already probably consuming way too many processed foods and sugars. Then you go and you train probably way more than you should in a glycolytic state that's not sparing glycogen, not teaching your body to save it and to burn fat, but to utilize it as much as possible while you're now trying to consume as many gels and as much sugar and as many processed whatever as possible, because you got to train your gut, right, to consume 120 grams an hour because of ProEs. So you're making things significantly worse while also not even taking into account, I wonder how great this is for my body, right? And then you can't take in 90, you can only take in 70, right? And you're having GI issues. You're like, oh, I need more gut training. That won't have GI issues. So the more calories you take in, the more GI distress you have because you probably don't need it. Two, your body has to expend so much energy, right, to cool itself and to digest food that now you're not putting out enough power to go, I need more sugar. And so like it's becoming an addiction, I think, and we're ruining our bodies because we're feeding it what it doesn't we're listening to these signals incorrectly. What the signals are actually saying is slow down a little bit. Let me use what I have on board to go slower, and I have time to digest stuff, and I'm making my body more aerobically efficient, which is also a great thing, right?
Right.
When it comes to fatigue resistance and durability, like that's the biggest factor. And so I think like those two things combined are how we got here, and how the 80 to 120 grams and working your way up has got here, when there's a much better way, one, to do it from an athletic standpoint, but it's also the best way to do it from a health standpoint. And as you can tell, I'm slightly fired up about this topic today.
Which is great, man. I love it because it really kind of resonates with me. And, I think last week I said it, I've said it a few times, but it's like, I think that the more fitter I am, the less I really even think about doing that kind of thing. And I think, it's that fine line between going too hard and really kind of starting to crave, that fuel or whatever. And I mean, think back to when I got in the sport and you and I were doing all that stuff. And I really didn't know much about fueling. And I almost in a weird way think it was ignorance is bliss, because we got out on long rides on the trace, 4 or 5 hours or whatever. And, I routinely ran out of fuel, like 20 miles away or whatever. And I would just figure it out and get back. I wouldn't hammer, we would hammer a lot, but you know how it is. It's sort of like, I didn't overfuel ever. And then all of a sudden I started getting into this thing. Well, you got to, put 4 scoops and concentrate and, all these types of things, and it almost feels good, like I could see how you could get hooked on it, because it's like, oh, wow, this does give me a little boost or whatever. I don't know if it's psychological or whatever it may be, but
yes,
the reality is that, I am definitely not a nutritionist, like you said, or a doctor, any of that kind of shit. So take my word for a grain of salt, but I really do believe that inflammation is the root of all ills, and sugar and all the crap we're putting in, it just increases inflammation. And it's like we feel like crap and think we need more of it. It's sort of that detox thing. Your detoxing is probably when whatever you're detoxing from is when you're probably craving it the most. It's like, I need more of that because I'm tired, and then it's just like it becomes an endless cycle for us all, when I just think it's really interesting to think about Aaron on the low side and just giving that a shot, because like, again, fitness, if you're really fit, you can go out and just knock out an hour and a half run, probably with nothing. But if you're not, you're like, I need to take a gel every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes or whatever, it's like, that's not the way to do it, I don't think.
Well, I mean, you nailed two things right there. One is like on the last piece of like the average person, depending on like fat and muscle mass, is carrying around 600 to 900 calories in glycogen.
Yeah.
You're telling me you're going to burn through that on an easy like zone 1, zone 2 run? No, you're not. And then you go back to what you said, and this is actually something that a lot of people are discussing now that I also personally believe. Again, not because I'm a scientist, because it totally makes sense. Again, I think sometimes we don't, and I do this to me, like I don't give my common sense and life experiences enough credit, right? Like you read these things about from sports scientists or clinical research trials, and you also don't know like the goal behind it. And that's usually tells you a lot. Like, again, the Gatorade Institute, like they wanted to find out what they found, University of Florida, like they had a goal, right? Which is to sell you Gatorade, which is why it's everywhere. And if Gatorade was fantastic, you know what they wouldn't have now? Sugar-free Gatorade. if that's what you like, it's just fascinating. But when you look at, again, people are searching for the wrong answers. You have these crashes, and I mean, take it like you're taking in so much sugar, and then you crash. You know what you're thinking is, oh, I must need more. Well, guess what? You do. You've trained your body to need more. So what happens is, and this is kind of like moves us perfectly into the next part of the conversation, is like you now do the opposite, which is, oh, well, I bonked, so I must need more. No, it's you need more because you've trained your body to crave more. And a lot of people have, and I have this belief too, is that bonking is just as much mental as it is physical. So when you get this, like if you're sitting on the couch and you're eating a bowl of ice cream, and you get like this giant sugar rush, it comes in your brain. You're not automatically like, oh, dude, I got to go work out, bro. No, because you feel like shit because you just consumed a bunch of crap, but mentally, and maybe you become more like a more chatterbox, or you're like that's what happens. Like your brain, you get this sugar spike, you're more awake mentally. Again, from a clarity standpoint, maybe because I think sugar is like a huge drug, and so but physically you feel like crap, and so when you take it in like caffeine and sugar and you have these like high doses, then you stop taking it or it runs out and you run through it quickly, then you automatically think you need more. And so you take in more, causing the same thing over and over again. So you go into the next phase of your training block and you think, all right, now I'm going to train my gut, right? I'm going to make and force my gut to increase its permeability, to make sure I can take in more sugar and more glycogen. I'm going to get up to 120. When that's basically doing this, right? So picture, and again, I said the average person athlete, depending on, size, height, muscle mass, fat mass, can hold anywhere between like 600 and 900 calories on board. Okay. So you got that in one glass. Then the other glass is fat, right? And by all accounts, using the same estimation, like the average person carries between like 2,500 to 5,000 calories of fat they can expend, right? So we're going to make that like the size of a gallon or one of those like Culligan bottles you see at the old school office, if you even have those anymore. That's that's fat, right? That's the store you can use for energy, right? So instead of trying to help and tap into and use that to work through becoming more metabolically efficient, you take what's basically like a shot glass of glycogen and you are trying to overflow it with more and more and more and more and more. And then when you go race, you've got this gigantic Culligan bottle full of stores that you can use for energy, okay? But all you're working on is this tiny glass. We'll upgrade it to like a rocks glass. You have this rocks glass where what you're trying to do is you're pouring it out constantly and trying to catch up, but you can never catch up, ever. But now your goal is to try and fit more because you can't increase the glass. You can't make the glass bigger. So you're trying to fit more into the glass. But you can't ever catch up because you can't ever replace enough glycogen, right, in that to fend off the amount that you're expending per hour. So you're always going to slowly work your way into a deficit. So you take those views of how to solve, right, your problem, right, which is bonking, or you're trying to become, take in more carbohydrates, or you're trying to take in more sugar, and you may be a person that does need to take in more, but I think the goal one is to figure out where you're the most inflexible, right? And everyone for nowadays, like everyone for whatever reason wants to take in, I got to go 100, 120. I'm trying to work my way up. Why? Why not? Right. But again, I think the reason for it is it fits perfectly the mode and the methods of training these days, which is train hard all the time. I'm going to train all the time. I'm going to go out on a sprint. I'm going to hit the track a couple times a week. I'm going to run hard. I don't have time for this, right? I'm a working man. I got to go hard 24/7, so you don't do any work, which again, volume is the greatest indicator of raising your fat oxidation rates. And so you just go hard all the time, and then you're going to create more. It's like you're feeding your addiction, which is nowhere to go. So you really have to like go back and none of this is new, right? And I think this is the fascinating part, which is how we've gotten like the more complex people have tried to get with their training, I think the worse off that we've been, right? So if you go back and look at like traditional periodization, right? And I'll talk a lot about like zone 1 and zone 2, and that is where you're going to be oxidizing the highest amount of fat. You're always oxidizing and using fat as a resource and a fuel source to create energy, no matter if you're going zone 1 or going zone 6. It's just a different in a breakdown, just like aerobic and just like aerobic and anaerobic percentages change, right? From going short to long, like, up to about, your threshold, you're still using mostly aerobic energy and oxygen consumption. Okay. But you're still using some anaerobic. Even up to like zone 5 or 6, you're still using some aerobic. It's not all anaerobic. It's still some of it's still with oxygen. Same goes for the usage of fats and carbohydrates. So you take fats and carbohydrates, and on the easier end of the spectrum, right, you're utilizing more fats. You're still utilizing some carbs, right, in that zone 1, zone 2. But as you work your way up to low zone 3, middle zone 3, up to zone 5, you're still using fats, but you're using now more carbohydrates. So what that means is you've got this in what's seemingly almost an endless supply, right? If you think about the caloric amount of energy and like 3,000 or 300 calories of fat, stored fat, versus 500 to 900 of glycogen, like you want to delay using that for as long as possible, right? So if you're going zone 1, zone 2, you don't need, right? You're not going to be, because the rate in which you're expending glycogen is so much lower at that easy rate. You're utilizing fat, but also continuously training your body to use fat as its primary source. And then the harder you go, the more carbohydrates and glycogen storage it starts to kind of pluck out. Again, and it's like a hand, right? I need that. So zone 1, zone 2, your left arm's grabbing a couple fat molecules here, and all it's doing is grabbing every once in a while grabs a carb, glucose. That's it. But then when you get to like zone 1, when you get to like zone 3, low to high, zone 4, zone 5, your right hand grabbing, I can grab another glucose molecule. Here we go. Okay, occasional fat. So you think about how quickly one's going to run out versus the other, right? But so what happens is as we've always talked about, with periodization and base training, it's got a lot to be zone 1, zone 2, and this flies in the desire of most athletes, right? Because base season for us falls in what? October, November, December, January, February, March. Right? The longer the base season, the better. Everyone always says that, and it's 100% true. But it also falls into indoor training time. And so to convince athletes, again, that get bored stiff when you've only got like one interval, and God forbid it's not pre-built, all they want to do is go hard. In the time of season where you want to be, again, in pros use all the time, they would periodize carbohydrates and lower their carb on a day-to-day intake because they don't need as much, and they would spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months of the year, right, training at a very, 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 very low intensity, which again is one of the best ways to increase fitness, right, and durability. Is to train in zone 1, zone 2, and find like kind of where your fat max zone is and train there, right? But it's so boring for athletes. They want to go hard all the time. The harder I go, the more glucose and sugar I need. So it feeds that need and that desire and that belief. But again, like going back to how like most things have been periodized in the past, and what they would consider, I guess, quote unquote, traditional periodization, is you can they're in that base phase where you're doing a lot of 85, 90% of all easy work, right? Burning fat, tons. I don't need as much carbohydrates, so I'm not taking in as much. You become like a fat burning machine. You've maximized that ability, right, with all this zone 1, zone 2 work. So your body's now, it's like, its first thought is, I'm going to burn through as much as I can. I'm going to spare the glycogen. And then when you move in like the build and peak phases, even when you go out and doing these things, your body's become so metabolically efficient, right, to use fat when it can. Your zone 1 and zone 2 power, or your fat max, target is gone from 160 to 190. Think about that. You spend a lot of time going easy at work, in and around your fat max, target, which, like I said, maybe it's 150. You've done all this work and you've done so much of it that you're now doing 190. Whereas before, your 150 fat max was just 150. In order to go hard and need more glycogen, at 190, you would need a lot more glycogen, right? That's the person who's training their gut. right? We're going to leave my fat max at 150, but I'm going to try and train my gut into consuming an enormous amounts of sugar and processed whatever to be able to hold 190 instead of just doing that. Again, I get it. Long, slow, boring work that just happens to be so great for endurance fitness and so good for your body that now I've gone from 150 fat max to 190. Do you know how much better of an athlete you are? You know how much faster you're going to be on race day? Again, using that giant Culligan bottle full of fat stores and sparing all the glycogen again, because again, most of us, at that race, we still have to run afterwards. And that's when you really want your glycogen stored. But now, again, people do it reverse. They're like, I'm going to do reverse periodization. I'm going to hammer it in the off season. I don't have time for the zone 1, zone 2 stuff. That's not how my bodies work. Like, I'm special. I'm going to hammer it. And all they're doing in their pain caves in January, February, March is doing these 1 hour total glycolytic glucose derived sessions where they're shoving fuel down their throat. And then when they want to go long, they're wondering why they bonk after 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes. I got to train my gut more. I got to take in more. No, all you needed to do was like take time. Again, none of this is new. It's to train your body in a way to begin to be metabolically flexible. Sugar and glycogen are great. They're fantastic. You just don't want to just spend them, right? Like, you don't want to be Oprah and handle, you get this and you get that and you want to save that for a rainy day, which is usually the run. So again, it's just, there's the obsession that we've become, that we've had and now have with it fits in that's why it's become the obsession, right? Is it fits perfectly, as we've discussed, into the now thought process and training that most of these athletes are like grasping towards, and it feeds it. And that's why you've got, companies like The Feed that are like, hey, you need 95 gels to get through, your Ironman. And afterwards we'll give you a referral to get, go to get your copay covered for becoming a diabetic.
Well, wow. There was a lot there, man.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. I meant to stop, but
for me, it's like, I all that stuff sounds right to me. I'm not a deep diver into like the actual function of things. I'm just a big listener to the body kind of deal. And, we talked a little bit about before the podcast about how, when I went down this summer, we rode for camp, a couple loops, and it was just a real chill kind of ride. I was kind of like hanging back, waiting for people, whatever, and I think I did it on like 2 loops on maybe 3 bottles of, 1 scoop scratch or whatever. And I just, we chilled it, but I mean, it wasn't that far off my race pace is what I'm getting at. And, the idea of, being fast in an Ironman, I think is just so, conflated with, like, it's confusing because, you're talking about all these hard trainer rides, and I again, everything is all important, whatever. But like for me during that race Sunday, it wasn't my speed. I just didn't have enough, long endurance, zone 2 stuff, because that's where it kills me, is on, when you're just kind of chilling on the flats and just trying to find those are the parts that hurt me. It's sort of like the ability, but I can always sort of, the hills, honestly, were almost a relief to me sometimes, because I could just kind of relax and just stay in a little pocket. And, it's a little bit more physical. And, you talk about how, being on that course, it's almost better to be stronger than faster a lot of times. And for me, it's those other sections, like the long, straightaways and, being comfortable and keeping that sort of cadence and not really pushing it, but almost that aerobic stuff that's just always been difficult for me when I talk about why I don't like flat courses, really, because I don't know. I don't train for them really, but I like to do, physical things. And it's, I don't know, it's that, disconnect between what's fast and what's fast on an Ironman course, and how to get there. It's just really interesting. I don't know. The fat burning. I mean, I think I do that naturally, maybe work on my fat stuff. And it's just like, I feel like towards the end of that run, I didn't have the best race, and I'm not trying to say that I nailed anything or whatever, but like by the end of that race, for whatever reason, I had enough left to do, a reasonable pace on the marathon. And I really got off that bike. Honest to God, I was, you start hitting those, you got your fueling down on the bike, and then you kind of think you have a run plan for the fuel and everything. And you're just going to grab a gel or pop this or whatever. It seems like most times I get off that bike, I'm just craving water. It's like I don't even, for the pace that, me or probably most people, half the people at least, are executing, they don't need to be just jamming. You know what I mean? I think that is what causes the problem a lot of times, is that you don't really even need like a lot of fuel at that point sometimes, especially if you're not going fast. I mean, it's like if you go for a 2-hour walk, you're not pounding Gatorade all the day. You don't really need to, but whatever.
I mean, and if you think about like the, just like from a digestion standpoint, like when you eat food, your heart rate rises because the more blood flow goes to your chest and your stomach. And so when you think about the amount of food people are having or trying to take in, and sugar, right, then how much harder you're trying to work. I mean, even just consuming like you made of sugar, like even if you're not doing anything, it's like a shot of sugar. It releases all these the insulin release makes your like you don't get heart palpitations from eating a chicken breast, right? But if you have too much sugar, right, you feel it. Like if you never have sweets, right? And I've done it before, like when I've gone like long periods of time when I don't have sweets, and I go back and I go and listen to it, like 100% you go and you have one, like it feels like your heart's been out of your chest.
Yeah.
So you go into these races, right, and you're supposed to be taking, like, you think about, you're trying to keep your heart rate low, and like, especially when the course is maybe hot or extra hard in your body, you can't tell me that makes sense to you. Oh, that's gonna treat my gut better, man. So you're trying to reverse what your body is already telling you that it is and needs and how it wants to like work. To me, you're basically saying, I'm smarter than my body. I know what it needs more than what it's telling me. Like, and again, like it's fascinating to me. Again, like I think everybody's different. I think some people need 20 carbs an hour. I think some people need 90. But I think everyone, maybe some people need 100, but these are like top level. And here's the thing, right? If you ask somebody, right, on their blog post or their Facebook post or their YouTube video, why they're trying to take in 120, they can't tell you. Oh, because the pros are doing it. I can go, yes, you may be able to go a little bit longer for a shorter period of time, but that's it. It's like it's like a horse, right? If you take you take a horse and the best like 100-miler on the planet, ultra runner, and you said that you wanted to race 100 miles. I think the human could probably either tie or keep up or win, because of how our bodies and systems are made. The horse would dust him for the first like 5 miles, all glycolytic, just crushing it. But they're also not made like we're endurance beasts. Humans are endurance beasts. That's how we're made. And so what we're trying to do is like feed ourselves like a steeplechase horse. And it flies in the, again, like if you go and if you want to ask your, the person, why exactly are you taking that in? Oh, so I can go harder for longer. Well, you're not increasing, or you're not doing things to increase your fitness. You're just telling me that I need more to go longer and harder. But the fact of the matter is like that's also not true. And you're also not. And so if you think about it from, again, we talk a lot about economy and efficiency when it comes to long course racing. Like, how is your form? How aero am I? How's my pedal stroke? How's my swim form? It's all about using the least amount of energy, right? That's also from a nutritional and a fueling standpoint. That's also a huge piece. It's how efficient can I be, right? So if you take like the you take your fat stores and your glycogen stores, like which ones are better? The ones that you have the most of. right? And so you want to use those as much because you have almost an endless supply. You want to save the goods for when you really, 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 really need them. You can't create more and make your body store more, or guess what? It would store more. Oh, well, Johnny, I know is going to shove 17 Martin gels down my throat tomorrow in 6 goo packs. I better store up, 1,200 calories, because he's going to do that. Or maybe I'll just store half of what because he's going to show. No, it just stores what it needs, and that's it. That's it. It can't store anymore. And so again, like, think this, and it's important to note, like when you go back to this, what is it doing to your body as a whole? Like, what is it making you crave when you're not taking them in? If all you're doing is downing insane amounts of carbohydrates and sugar when you're training, guess what? That's probably what you're going to crave during the week. That's not good for you. And again, it's this vicious cycle that we I think we're like latching onto, but it fits right into what everyone wants. A quick fix. I can purchase it. I can hammer it out. That's kind of like, that fits my agenda. That fits where my mindset is. It fits my attention span instead of like the other end. And yeah, like I do think it's important to do like carbohydrate periodization in certain times of the year with athletes. Every day, no. But it's also, a lot of it's just, to me, it's just, a lot of it's just common sense that we've tossed out for whatever reason because, and they're fucking like $8 a gel. Are you serious right now? Mm-hmm. Are you serious? Like the amount of money people are spending to shove things down their throat into their stomach they can't absorb, and also to make their body more inefficient. You're becoming more dependent on glycogen. Like, yes, you see these pro athletes doing it, but their fat oxidation rates are through the roof. They're probably 10 times compared to what yours is, right? They train 20, 30 hours a week, a lot of aerobic work. They have a good, nice, very lean, trim body mass, low fat. Like, they're doing a ton of good things, but still, it's still not great for their body. I mean, I was listening to a podcast weeks ago about the unbelievable like toll that what these pro cyclists take in and what they try to like consume, what it does to their body, and how what their health is like post career. And they're trashed.
Yeah,
their bodies are trashed. I mean, and I just don't think that we take that into, again, as age group, we don't think about that, right? Like, and I think it's a shame. Like, I think it's something that we should always be thinking about in so many ways, because again, like efficiency and how are we treating and training our body, and how is it supposed to be used, and what is making it more efficient? I know it's going to take more time, and it might be boring, but like what's good and what's not good for me, and what makes the most sense, right? And then the fact that I might only be training 10 to 12 hours a week, but now when I'm also taking in during these 10 to 12 hours, I'm trying to train my gut. Like, what's that doing to my body, the rest of it? Because it's a fact, dude. The more sugar you eat, the more you crave it. The more carbohydrate you consume, the more you crave it. And then what happens is the more fatigued you get afterwards, the more you feel like you need again. So everybody, like, you get this, and going back to like the heart palpitations, like by having like go to Sunk and get a blast, your heart rate is like, I see this all the time, like once a week, maybe every 10 days, we'll head up to Andy's with Hayden. We'll get like a little frozen custard. My sleep that night is destroyed. Heart rate's always 4 to 5 beats higher per minute. My sleep is terrible. My recovery, everything's terrible. It's from that amount of junk that you put in your body. And yes, is what you're consuming in like these gels and packets and bottles the exact same? No, but it's sure as hell got a lot of the same. And so if you think about like what we're doing and like what we're training our body to depend on, right? To me, it's very similar to, this is probably gonna make people mad. I'm okay with that. To me, it's a lot like not addressing a symptom or something that's wrong with you in a holistic way that you can like address it, that'll improve your overall health, but instead you just pop a pill, right? You're not fixing what's wrong with your body, right? You're not addressing it from a systematic point of view. You're just not. You're just popping a pill to remove a symptom. Right. And I think that it goes to our, how we've become, in my opinion, as a society. Like, I don't really want to work through that. Can I just have a pill? I don't want to work hard for that or drop eating this. Can I just have a pill or a shot? I don't want to do the work. And so when you look at this, how we've gotten and how we've what we've done to ourselves and our bodies with the way that we eat and the way that we live and the lack of sleep and the rise in stress and cortisol levels, just give me more sugar and carbs, baby. Just shove them in, baby. And then you get to training and you bonk after a 20 or 30-minute run. The problem isn't your glycogen. The problem is your body. Like, you have become so inefficient in how you expend and utilize energy. And guess what? You think, I bonk. You know what I need? A gel. Know what I need? Processed sugar. Shove it down my throat. That's the total opposite, right? You go for a 30-minute run, you bonk. Guess whose fault it is? Not a gel. A gel isn't going to solve it. It might make you feel better for 2 seconds. The answer is probably going on 5 1-hour walks a week to start, teaching your body that you can actually truly burn fat, or maybe just run slower. Mm-hmm. But again, you can't sell that. Right? You can't sell that. It doesn't come in a subscription model. You can't be an ambassador of common sense, or you're not going to see people rolling around in kits next year winning Tri Club awards because I'm part of the long, slow endurance training, metabolically efficient team. No, they want you to buy products and shove products down people's throats, and they want you to be damned of what it does to your body. They just want you to do it and sell it, and that's what you're doing. Like, we just don't think through, I think, all these things about, again, and I get it. You and I talked about before the podcast, the amount of time it takes to think through things on our own, right? Like, even for you and I's own training, it's a perfect example. You work all day and you do all these things for the people. To work on our own training seems really, really, really hard, right? Yeah. So I get it. When it comes to nutrition and fueling and how much we take in and when and how to train and how to periodize and what's needed and what's not needed. Most people are just swinging, again, blindfolded at a piano, hoping a Reese's falls out. But in reality, it's probably a couple pounds of black licorice.
Yeah, man, everything you're saying really kind of boils down to we just continue to put more stress on our body. And what we put in it is putting stress on it. And also, a lot of people probably that listen to this podcast are, middle age, a little older. And the older we get, the harder it is to deal with shit like that. Like, when we're young, you can put almost anything in your body and be back the next day or even the same night, And I think you can get away with it, and then you start seeing that, and you have that pattern in your life for so long that you don't recognize how much stress that's putting on your body just to sort of recover from carb overloads or a big night of something and too much sugars or whatever it may be. And, even which is interesting because even younger people, the whole fasting thing and, and I wrote a post on this, but I think fasting is okay, and it's good, but I think it's not a health, thing, but it's more of a spiritual thing. You think about how people would just stop eating just to recognize suffering and be more in tune with grace and things like that. But to kind of keep putting your body through this state of starvation, for example, and even I'll come clean with, cold plunging is very stressful on the body depending on the temperatures and things like that. So it kind of took me a little while, but I've adapted to almost what I call zone 2 plunging, where it's not super, super intense. It's something that feels good and it kind of charges me up, and I hope knocks some inflammation down. But the reality is that when we're, putting our body through training stress and then eating like shit and not sleeping and all that's cortisol release and it's stress, and it creates an imbalance, and it's no wonder we feel like shit half the time. It's really comes back to what we were saying, about day-to-day nutrition and fueling yourself right and approaching your workouts right. There's nothing wrong with going hard, but I mean, that's why I was I did a FTP test, and my FTP could have went up 10 points, based on what I did, but I just kept it the same and really kind of aimed even lower because I just, it's the shelf life for kicking our own asses is very short. You know,
Right.
we can go through things, and I think a lot of people sort of get into the sport, maybe have a little success, and then just go balls out, and then the next thing you know, three years later, you're like, where'd they go? It's like it's like gone, you know, because the intensity as we get older takes its toll, you know. So I it's all relative, right? Like how clean and how stress-free is your life, you know, you can handle more. But if you're using that as a stress relief when you're already stressed out and putting more stress on yourself, that's I think a recipe for failure in the long run. So that's kind of how I look at things. And, you know, it's simple as during training this year, you know, like we talk about, like you get up and if the first thing you do is just reach for coffee and just start pounding it down, that's a sign probably that you weren't sleeping well, you're not eating the best before it. So a lot of times I would just try to get up and sort of like your gut's just sleeping and relaxing, and all of a sudden you're just pouring out caffeine and sugar and whatever. It's like, what the hell's going on here? But so I tried to get up and just before anything get out on a easy movement on a sup board for like 15, 20 minutes, and that sort of like woke me up. And then it's like you can handle things better too then, you know, rather than using the fuel to get you going, and then use the fuel a little bit less maybe.
No, I mean, and again, like that's why I think it's so important for people to explore on their own, you know, and to take things like, I think I even mentioned this, you know, months and months and months ago, like I experimented after like really trying to do research into what you need versus like what you're told, like, or what I feel like I need. I remember I said I did like an FTP test, and I did one of my best ones in years, and I didn't take in a single ounce of sugar or carbohydrates when I did it.
Yeah.
And then I raced that, and then I raced the sprint triathlon on 2 bottles of Element, and had 20 watts higher bike power than the year before. And like I'm not telling you that was the answer that I was just telling you. I say all that to say I'm still trying to figure out, like, what do I really need? Like, how much do I really need versus, I mean, to me, my goal is to figure out how little I can get away with versus spending enormous amounts of money on gels. I mean, hell, I remember back in the day, like I'd get a bottle of like whatever I was using at the time. It cost like $25 and lasts me 6 weeks. Now you get a jug of whatever, and it's like, it says something like 15 servings, and it costs you $45 damn dollars. Like that's gonna take you what, like a week? It's insane. The gels, and I mean, like the amount that people are is unreal to me. And
I know.
So I think, like, again, like in one breath we can say like how amazing the human body is and how intelligent it is, but then we don't give it enough credit when we try to shove foreign things in its body.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to me. So it's like trying to. And it's also interesting to me because I think it's a healthier way to think about it in terms of like how efficient can I make my body, especially in long course racing. How efficient can I make my body to use that? And so how little can I get by with? And the thing is like I guarantee if you took that right, you're probably better off, because you see the more and more people like taking in so much sugar and so much processed food with higher exertion rates. They can't digest it. They're going slower, heart rate's higher, and you can't figure it out. Mm-hmm. I'd be willing to bet money that GI issues, toilet stops aren't caused by underfueling.
Oh yeah,
they're caused by overdoing it, and also way too much salt and not enough water. Like, guess what happens when you have too much water? You have to pee. You have to pee. That's it. You have to pee. Mm-hmm. Big deal. You have gut issues. It's what you put in that water, and it's how much. Like your body's like, like you're walking like on a day-to-day basis. You go out and your body's like, I had GI issues. You're never like, I think I was over. I think I took in too much water. No, like maybe like feels like, bloated for a minute, but it's not that you took in too much water. Your body just pees it out. But if you're having like the amount of energy it takes your body to digest water, slightly different than asking your body to digest 120 carbs an hour and 35 grams of sugar and the 6 salt pills you snorted going up the hill. That's why your body is revolting. One, with GI distress, and two, you feel like ass and your heart rate's higher. Again, like I think we just disassociate, and you nailed it with the stress piece, right? Is the baseline stress level we all have, again, is so high in day-to-day life now that, again, when you go to train and you adding stress by training hard at a high intensity all the time, and then combined with that, you're shoving things in your body that is also a stressor. When the answer is probably, if life stress is high, then you want easy, slow training, right? To help dissipate that stress and not cause stress. And then while you're doing that long, slow training, guess what? Take in some water, take in maybe a little bit of carbohydrates, whatever it is, whatever's feeling right for the day. That's going to help you continue to have that aerobic, ride that or run you're trying to have. Like, that's not a stressor. That's becoming more efficient. Like, shoving things, trying to gut train is more stress on your body. You think you need more stress in your life right now? I know I sure as hell don't. You don't either. None of us do. None of us. And so, again, like, the point of the podcast today is we're not, obviously, we didn't provide one, a matter of fact, black and white, it's black or white, right? Like, it's, or excuse me, it's black and white. It's not black or white. There's multiple ways to figure out things, and sometimes it's gray, but it's to challenge you to think like, hey, like what makes sense to me and how much, and is what I'm doing makes sense to me from not just like a fitness standpoint, but from a holistic, like, health standpoint. And the great thing is, like, we couldn't have this conversation if we were sponsored by, Precision 7000 gel or the feed, where all they want to do is, like, they're probably going to start mailing out insulin shot subscriptions in a little bit. It's just like, it's insane to me. It really is.
Yeah. Well, on that, back when we can end it, but what you're just saying at the end reminded me, and I think I've told this story again, but I mean, after 900 podcasts, you have one, but back in the day when I just kind of was getting into triathlon and I was real curious about it. And I remember the Music City Olympic one year, and I kind of knew some of the people, and the guy who won the Olympic that day, I remember talking to him, and I was like, hey man, tell me about your fueling for this race. He goes, well, I just had a water bottle and I put like a pinch of salt in it. And he won the whole Olympic that day, and he basically just fueled on nothing, it sounded like to me. So I just found that really interesting.
I mean, we have it all in us.
Yeah, that's another really good point.
For something that short, it's in us. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want to always train like that because you're doing enough at that level, right? You're doing enough intensity, right?
Yeah, I don't say it's right or wrong. It's just interesting. It's a fact, something that happened in my life. 100% is. And if you look back at, like, we're just now in the last 3 or 4 years, right, with bikes and disc wheels and aero helmets and super shoes, right? Think how long it took us to break, like, the Ironman Kona record. Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's the other thing I was interested. I was kind of trying to look that up, what those guys were fueling with back then.
I bet you it was like less than 60 max. I bet it was less. I bet it was max 60 carbs an hour.
Yeah. So then,
you think the best marathoners in the world, right? They probably only consume like 300 calories for a marathon. Maybe, I would guess. You think they go out on these like 2.5 hour, 3 hour training runs with 6 gels strapped to their waist? No. Like, they run so easy. They're insane, like, fat burning machines, and their aerobic capacity and the rate in which they can run at an aerobic pace is so insane. When you watch them in the marathon, they're doing like 540s, breathing in and out their nose. Like, that's it, because they want to save that for the last 5K to sprint. And so again, like we can lock it up here, but, and I have this conversation with people all the time, like that get like super concerned with the fact that they're either, maintaining weight or putting on weight during heavy training blocks. And I'm like, well, what do you put in your body day to day? Mm-hmm. Well, my ride, I'm taking like 6 gels. I'm like, you're taking in more than you could possibly ever be burning. And you're taking enormous amounts of sugar and process. And then guess what? It's also making you crave that all the time anyway. And so, like, that you, again, overall health, like, happy and healthy. Like that should be the goal, right? Happy and healthy. And I think if you do that, then you'll be high performing. It's just, I think we've just gotten so lost in, we've just got lost in our way. And I think it's, again, like if you're done racing for the year, or you've got another race, it's not like your big race, like it's time to maybe experiment a little bit and figure out like how I can train my body to become better and more efficient. And I'll actually probably feel better, maybe even look better, maybe even like my health will be improved.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's like the goal should be to take in as little as possible as you need. Right. We said that last time. It's like, that should be our goal, is to kind of whittle that down somehow, or at least, 100%. Not overdo it, because it's that stuff. And I'll just say it, like, I know how it goes for me. And like when I start eating, just trying to crap up with food all the time, those ingredients in that fake food and those fake gels and all that other stuff, that's what makes people overweight. Or that's what produces fat in us. I'm just convinced of it. It's the crap
that
food.
What again produces fatness?
Well, just the synthetic ingredients, the stuff that our body has no idea how to handle most of the time. I just think it's more of this regular whole food is the answer. I mean, I think if you I just think you just sit around and nibble on chips and pretzels and stuff like that. It's having way more impact than we think on our body composition. That's just my theory.
I don't know. I've heard quite a few people go to the doctor, and the doctor's suggestion was they could put on a few more gels.
But seriously, it's like, come on.
Blood pressure's out the roof. Your cholesterol's high. Your body composition's out of whack. You know what you need? You definitely need more sugar, more carbs, and more gels. It's for sure. You definitely need that. That'll solve it. And come back in 6 months and you'll be wrecked. But yeah, listen. Hopefully this has been a thought-provoking. And I'm sure it'll come across to some people as polarizing one end of the way, one in the other, and that's fine with me. But
well, if you just can't think, I mean, you got like, I love how you phrase it, because it's like you want to make you think, and it's not like, I don't hear us giving exact advice on anything like that. It's just like, just explore it a little bit, because I mean, we've been doing this kind of a long time, and that's just sort of the things that have kind of materialized.
It's also both, right? It also and hopefully that came across, like, to me, that's all that matters, is it makes sense to me.
Well, don't get mad at it. It's like people have a tendency to just get mad because it's like,
oh, I know. Dude.
You know what I mean? Like, this isn't right or wrong. It's just a discussion. And like, that's the craziest thing in this world to me right now. Is just like,
because people get so offended by having to critically think.
Yeah. And it's just yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to make me think critically about my belief. Why? Don't ask me why. I can't answer that. No one can answer why anymore about anything.
No.
So when you ask them, they get super offended. As I ask athletes all the time, well, why? Tell me why. Well, I don't know. I'm like, well, then why'd you ask?
Like when people say shit to me, like, this is kind of what I believe. I'm like, oh, wow. How come? Really? Why? Well, it's just what it, or whatever. And then, it's not like I get like absolutely livid about somebody's perspective on nutrition. It's like, what the hell, man? It's like weird. I don't know. Maybe it is right for you. I guess that's the ultimate thing.
Right?
Maybe what you're doing is perfect.
It's also, I think we find, I think we find comfort in, again, let me think about comfort. Critical thinking isn't comfort, right? Just mindlessly grabbing this and adopting this pattern because someone else did it. That's comfort, right? You didn't have to think. And then you can also blame it on someone else if it doesn't work. So it's like, again, like it's an interesting, and you brought up a great point, and we'll shut up, I swear, about, I think a lot of it, I think, is also like, you follow these influencers, and like the allegiance people have to certain products is really kind of crazy to me.
It's a little weird,
like,
man.
It's a little weird. Like, I'm like, in your room, is there a bag of Infinite with like 3 lit candles around it? Like, I mean, it's just weird. It's just weird to me that like, and because the thing too is like, if you're that, in bed with the product, then are you ever gonna like even think about that there might be a better one, or that it's actually not what you need. I think a lot of times we accidentally have success and we assume we have the answer figured out, when really we just had a good day and maybe we hit 80% of our real ceiling, but we thought it was 100%. So yeah, I think, listen, we'll stop it there. Hopefully this has been, well, I'm going to turn my inbox off until Monday. For the hate mail. I'm sure we'll get a lot of hate mail from, high carbers and low carbers and everyone in between, but hopefully we get some emails from the critical thinkers, and hopefully this did. Hopefully it made you think through how your body's wired. Because again, it's not all opinion. A lot of it's also like just straight up science and common sense. So, all we're doing is asking you to critically think about yourself, not about a hashtag or a product. Think about yourself and what you would suggest to your kids, right? And what you would consider, what suggestions you would give to someone trying to improve their health. Because that's why we do this, right? We got into this for better health, right? To be healthier overall and to take care of our bodies, and to be able to live longer, happier, fulfilling lives. And so, whatever you find is that recipe, then have at it. But, I would challenge you in thinking about what that recipe is.
Fair enough, man.
Fair enough. This has been fun. This is like more of like a topic that we usually talk about off air. Before the podcast, it was nice to go long on something like this. Then we got, what's that? Michigan 70.3 this weekend. Ironman Maryland coming up. I mean, we had Chattanooga. It's a busy stretch. So if you're racing this weekend, go out. And also, if you're doing Michigan 70.3, Mike did a really, really awesome video with Coach Jeremy, C26 Coach Jeremy, on Michigan 70.3 course. Where can they find that? Just in our Crushing Iron Facebook page, or where can they find that, Mike?
Yeah, it's in the Crushing Iron closed group, and it's also just posted on Crushing Iron YouTube page.
Oh, perfect.
Should be the first one on there.
Okay, good. So yeah, check that out, especially because there's not many of those. It's a fairly, I wouldn't consider it a new race, but it's a fairly new event with not much out there. So if you're looking for that, make sure you hop on there and check that out. If you're a parent and you're in the Fort Wayne area, we have a C26 Youth Triathlon going on the 15th. So you can go to Run Sign Up and check out that. Get your kids involved. Great time of year. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm available. Robbie at c26triathlon.com. And if you have any hate mail, that goes to Get a Grip at c26triathlon.com.
It'll be fine. Take a few deep breaths and let it go.
Exactly. Take a few breaths and let it go. All right, man. Have a good weekend, dude.
All right, you too, man. I'll see you later.